Good morning, singers. We're going to talk a little bit today about how to sustain a high tessitura in male head voice. Many of you have asked me questions about this over email, and it's difficult to answer all of the emails. So I thought we would give a little active demonstration. The male head voice has been described differently throughout the centuries, but in the 20th century, scholars have come to an agreement that the male voice has three registers, and they are often termed chest, head, and falsetto. They now sometimes have scientific names, modal for the chest, maybe loft for the head voice, but we'll stick with the time-honored terms that bel canto used: voce di petto, the voice of the chest, and la voce di testa. But within that, they made a distinction. The historic Italian school made a distinction between the head voice, la voce di testa, and falsetto. So to describe the difference, they referred to the male head voice, which was called for in singing serious music, la voce piena in testa, the full voice in the head, or it was sometimes known as la voce completa, the complete voice, indicating again the difference between this register and falsetto as a completely different register. The next thing I think it's important that we learned in the 21st century was due to a lot of research, especially by Dr. Hirano. And we found out that what we call registers really depends upon the degree of contraction of the vocalis muscle. The vocalis muscle is another name for the internal thyroarytenoid muscle, which runs through the vocal folds. Now, this muscle is, when this muscle is tensed, the activity is what we describe as chest voice. So we could say then that registers correspond to certain muscular activities within the larynx. When in falsetto, the internal thyroarytenoid muscle, the vocalis muscle, is relaxed. And in that case, only the edges, the vocal ligaments, vibrate, somewhat like strings. That certainly is not a tone that we would normally use in complex singing in serious music. It could be used quite nicely in pop music or even on Broadway these days, but it was certainly not used by the bel canto masters who gave us the first and second golden ages of singing. So then we get into how the singer actively controls movement from one register to the next. And most of you know how to sing in chest voice. It is the register we use in speaking, although we speak at the very bottom of it. Like, for example, right now, I'm speaking on a low F sharp at the end of the chest voice. The speaking voice normally only occupies 2 or 3 notes. I might speak there, and I might speak there, but it would begin to sound a little funny if I spoke there. And that's only a span of a minor third. So the speaking voice, while it utilizes chest register, only utilizes a tiny part of it. But at least it gives you a beginning understanding of what chest register is and sounds like. There's a C scale in chest voice, chest register. And the terms voice and register mean exactly the same thing. Now, are there natural limits to the areas where registrations take place? Yes, there are. We found out by this century in voice science that the term chest voice was applied to that first area. We might call it modal register today. That term was applied because the chest wall is set in vibration by the fundamental of the tone when we are singing in certain areas, certain frequencies. Those vibrations are maximized at around 180 hertz, and they cannot be felt above 300 hertz. So that's very interesting. 300 hertz, although it's not precisely on the scale of A equals 440, is pretty close to exactly the place where the so-called second passaggio begins, the switch from the extended chest voice into the full head voice, la voce piena in testa. In the last century, both Garcia and Lamperti gave us exercises to develop that transition from chest to full head. Now I'm going to be speaking in terms that apply mostly to basses and baritones today, but it does apply exactly to tenors as well, and I'll try not to leave them out completely. So the statements that we were given from Garcia and from Lamperti is that when the singer reaches the second passaggio, he must close the vowel if he is singing an open vowel. Only closed vowels can go over the little bridge, the passaggio, and reach into head register. Now Garcia was so convinced of this that at one point he even separated the term chiaro oscuro and thought that chiaro was the chest voice and oscuro was the head voice. He later corrected that, and Lamperti never went along with that. But you can understand why he would make such a mistake, because the vowels which enter over the passaggio and bring the voice into la voce piena in testa, the full voice in the head, must be closed. So a very good example would be to go over this area with a closed vowel. E is a closed vowel. So let's go over the area, which for me is around E flat. Many basses it would be D, and many baritones it could be E natural. Although we do have to say that Titarufo, perhaps one of the greatest baritones of all time, counseled all of his students, or actually not students because he did not really teach much, he counseled all baritones never to sing the E natural in the chest. He credited his vocal failure, because he lost his voice very early, with having himself sung so many E naturals straight open from the chest. You may not want to take his advice. Maybe to you it makes no difference, but I tend to believe we ought to listen to someone as great as Rufo. So the classic baritone voice covers on the E natural or E flat, the bass on the D or the E flat. Now, the term cover was introduced in the 19th century to describe the closing of the vowel into the passaggio. The term copertura or coperta. Uh, in Italian, a coperto or coperta is a covering, like a roof that covers a gazebo. And it was used to describe empirically the closing of the vowel into the passaggio. So the covered voice in English, coperta becomes covered, is a description of that closing. Now here I give you an eTube link where Pavarotti sort of primitively discusses this in his voice. His point of transition is F sharp, classic for most tenors. And he sings it for you open and shows how it doesn't sound very good. And then he shows you how he covers the voice on F sharp. Now, the word cover has been highly maligned in American vocal pedagogy by people who do not know how to do it well. Now, a lot of pedagogy that comes from the provinces of Germany and Nordic schools often have an impure vowel when they go into the passaggio. Many of the vowels, or most of the vowels, become some sort of schwa, an sound, as you go above the passaggio in those schools. That, of course, is to be completely denied. We're not allowed to do that. The classical rule in Italian, a cantare come si parla, allows for this slight closing of the vowel, but it would not allow for the vowel to be extinguished and turned into some form of as you go above the passaggio. So if we look at my turning point, my passaggio, on a closed vowel, it doesn't sound like it's very difficult. So there the E vowel went into head voice because the E is so strong in the upper formants and it's so closed it goes right over the passaggio as long as you don't push excessive breath pressure. So the passaggio needs actually less sense of pushing than the chest voice. Even it shouldn't be pushed, but there's a sense of a great deal of energy compiling underneath that chest voice. In the passaggio, that's not the case. In the passaggio, it feels like you hold back on the air pressure and you allow the closed voice to gently go over the bridge. So then if we take another closed vowel, let's take the vowel oo. You will see how it easily goes over the bridge. Ooh. No problem there. And we could take another closed vowel, O, and it would be the same thing. But when we get to an open vowel, like ah, it becomes a big thing. And the question that has arisen in the 20th century, largely due to the last 20 years of McNeil singing, is whether or not to carry that chest voice on up higher than the normal passaggio. And McNeil did that for reasons of his own. You can like it or not like it, but Ruffo warned against it. So if, for example, we took the ah, and let's take it above my passaggio of E flat, let's not close it, and let's just see what kind of a sound develops. As Pavarotti demonstrated on his example, it begins to sound uneasy and choked, as certainly not a sound we'd want to try to force. So everything manages quite nicely when we close the ah to its nearest vowel. In the Italian language, that would be O, as in morire. We don't have to close it clear to O. Garcia gave us a recommendation that the A closes towards O, but doesn't reach that. Well, within the Italian language, that would be the vowel O, as in morire. And if we do that, then you find that the A vowel slips easily right into the head register. So it seemed like, there are two registers there. We shouldn't try to do that, should we? Yes, you should. You make the registers work by allowing them to seem to you to be totally separate in their timbre. That is, in fact, the definition of a register. A register is a group of notes which have the same timbre, are produced by the same mechanism within the larynx, and which present with the same vibrations to the body. It's a group of notes that sound alike, feel alike, and are produced alike. And just as any gear in a car transmission, you don't try to, if it's a stick shift, you don't try to disguise shifting from first to second. You do what you need to do. You shift from first to second. If it's an automatic transmission, it does it by itself. And so we're trying to grow an automatic transmission within you, the singer, so that you don't have to think about this. So as Pavarotti himself said, it becomes ingrained and you don't have to think about it. But right now, if it's not working for you, you might have to think about it. Now then, once the vowels pass the bridge and go into the extended head voice, then they lose their closure and they open back up to the sound that they had in chest voice. So that ah, which had to cover or to close to all around E natural, if we take it up to high G, now becomes the ah again as we had it down here. And we can do that, we can show that, let's show it by 5 tones. So the first 2 tones will be ah in the chest voice. The third tone and the fourth tone will be aw in the covered tone. And the top tone, G, will begin to open back to ah. It didn't quite get back, but if we're going up higher into the scale, it will. So there we see how that was up to the A. So that you see the A had an ah, which is much closer to the chest voice ah than to the closed vowel in the passaggio. Now that's all preparatory stuff so that I can talk a little bit about how to sing a high sustained tessitura. One of the first things is to have a good set of exercises which strengthen the muscles and the concepts in the mind regarding the differences in chest voice and in head voice. Now I've started on a D major scale, and so the arpeggiated octave will all be in chest voice on the vowel ah. But now the 10th tone is F sharp and will require me to darken that vowel and then to come back into the chest. Head, chest, head, chest, head, chest, 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 chest. So there you begin to get an ease and a development of moving quickly from one register to the next. Sounds like this. You see how that easily, you could hear a big change here. Now that change has to be quick and it has to be ingrained, or you'll have no chance at all at sustaining a high tessitura piece. Now, some time ago, really a few days ago, I published on YouTube a setting of the Lord's Prayer by J. Rouse, which was written, I think, for Helden tenor, because no baritone I know can sing it. But I successfully recorded it and have sung it many times, and I wanted to give you the secret for how that took place, how to do that. The secret is to get into a head voice earlier than usual. So, whereas you could carry the chest voice on up as high as even E flat if you wanted to, then you would have to go in and out of head, chest, head, chest, head, chest a lot, which could be tiring. And you might experience it very difficult to sing that song. But if you went into the covered tone early, then you would energize the head voice more. And staying in the head voice, controlling the breath pressure on the chords, you could negotiate this passage or this high tessitura. Another example would be in Celeste Aida. It opens with this usage of the F chord, and the question is always, should the tenor cover the F natural, put it into head voice, or should he open it up from the chest? I won't demonstrate opening from the chest since I'm not a tenor. Different tenors have different feelings about that. Certainly the heavier the tenor, the better is the solution if you cover the F natural and begin to get the head voice engaged early, so you don't tire out the voice by carrying the chest so high. I think, for example, of Mario del Monaco, who throughout his career had great difficulty singing this aria on pitch. But in his early days, in the early 50s, he would cover the F, and he had much greater strength and much better pitch accuracy when he would do that. In his later days, say in the 61 from 1961 and later, he would try to sing the F natural open, and it would put a sort of a whine and a strain in the voice, which disallowed the head voice from really coming in smoothly and staying strong. You can find an example of that in the recording of his Aida on YouTube from Tokyo in 1961. So let's give a baritone example, how we do that. At the end of the prologue, you have a choice of either opening and carrying the chest through. All right, did you hear in my YouTube example how I brought the covered tone in, the head voice in, earlier than usual? I brought it in as low as a D above middle C. And that kept the voice strong in the head and kept me from having to move in and out of the chest very much. That's what gave me the ability to sing over that high tessitura. And it also works on tenor repertoire. So again, if we look at the chest voice and the full voice in the head, D major scale in the chest to then a continuation into the head voice. It sounds like this on ah. So it sounds like the voice has a continuity, but in fact there are two gear registers being negotiated quickly. And we can pop from one to the next. Here's the G in the chest, and let's do the F sharp, or the E flat, where there's no doubt that that's in my second passaggio. So the covered tone there is a little darker than the chest tone below, and it energizes head. So there, by energizing the head, we move from E flat on up to the B flat. So I hope this is a beginning pedagogy for you that will pay off. Some of you simply probably need to practice this drill of moving from chest to head. Now, a word about falsetto. In earlier centuries, there was a fight about nomenclature, and some people use the term falsetto, almost equating it with the head voice, which is not true. And other people talked about the registers as though they were ingredients that you could mix, like salt and pepper in a cake. They're not like that. They're more like gears in a transmission. So you can't blend them any more than you can blend first gear and third gear in your car's transmission. They have to effectively be used just as your car has to run in first and shift to second and third into overdrive as you're going down the highway. So the falsetto is not something that you can mix with the chest and get head voice. Head voice is its own register, and it corresponds to certain muscular activities in the larynx. I won't go into that today because that's quite long and complicated. But you will notice that the full voice in the head loses no power. And some people will say, oh, that's just chest voice. No, it's not. Here's chest voice from E to shining E. There you can hear how the larynx pulls up at the top and the tone begins to sound strangled, as in Pavarotti's example. And unfortunately, McNeil in his later years would even sing the F and the F sharp straight open from the chest. In Rigoletto, he would even sing that in Cortigiani. This is highly unfortunate vocalism, and certainly Tita Ruffo would highly disapprove of that. And it began, unfortunately, because McNeil had a cult around him. Young baritones began to experiment with carrying the chest higher and higher until they lost the ability to easily enter the head voice. And as a result, we had a whole generation, still do have a whole generation, of baritones who are not comfortable singing above a F sharp or a G. So whatever value that technique was to McNeil in his later years, it's not a historic technique, and it will not help you. Okay? There's the classic movement in the ending to the prologue, where we move from the chest voice, al pari, di voi. So we move from the C sharp in the chest on the E vowel, which already being closed allows a good entrance into head, and then the movement up to the A flat on the diphthong oi. Now the question is always whether or not the diphthong should be sung completely. I believe that both parts should be sung. So you would onset on all and allow the E to come in at the last minute. That is only one approach, but you could hear how the approach from the C sharp to the A flat was strong. That A flat was not chest. That's the full voice in the head. La voce piena in testa. Now you might say, if you wanted to look at it empirically, that somehow it's connected to the chest. But that would just be an empirical way of describing something. It's not an actuality. So you could describe second gear in your car as being something similar to first gear, but that also would be an inaccuracy. It would just be an observation based on the empirical results of having ridden in a car and observing how it feels. So I hope this will help you and give you some ideas. I've attached a few other YouTube excerpts to show this movement and the strengthening of the chest voice, or rather the strengthening of the head voice that's required to sing in an extended high tessitura. Happy singing.